Good day, class. Once again, this is Dr. Alex, and welcome to our lecture 2 in our course, Introduction to Pragmatics. Last lecture, we accepted a claim on faith. That context is not just a small adjustment to meaning, it can be the entire source of it. Today, we see the actual machinery behind that claim. Look at the photograph behind our title. In the middle of a busy street, one man is marked out with a red box. Everyone else in that crowd is just as real, just as present, but our attention is anchored to one specific point. That is exactly what language does every time you say the words I, here, or now. This module is called Deixis and Distance, and by the end of this session, you will be able to recognize and analyze this pointing system in 5 different forms: person, place, time, social status, and discourse itself. Let's begin. Let's start with something every one of you has done today: sending a text message. Imagine your phone buzzes and the message reads, "Nasa dito na ako, malapit na." On its own, this sentence is almost meaningless. Ako, I, who is that? Dito? Here. Where exactly? Malapit na? Near? But near what? Near in space or near in time? Notice that every word here is grammatically perfect. There is no error in English or in Filipino. And yet all 3 words are completely empty until you know who sent the message, where they were, and when they typed it. The moment your phone buzzes and you glance at the sender's name, though, all 3 blanks fill in instantly. You know exactly who ako is, roughly where dito refers to, and that malapit na means minutes away, not kilometers. Words like I, here, and now do not carry a fixed meaning the way bicycle or teacher does. Their meaning is assigned fresh, on the spot, depending entirely on who is speaking. Linguists have a name for this. It comes from the ancient Greek word for pointing, Deixis. So how does Deixis actually work? Every deictic expression needs an anchor point, a fixed reference from which distance is measured. Linguists call this the deictic center, or, using the Latin term, the origo. Look at the man standing alone in this empty room. He is the origo. By default, that anchor is always the speaker, standing at the place and moment of speaking. This is called the egocentricity of Deixis. The linguist Stephen Levinson, in his influential 1983 book, identified 5 dimensions that all anchor to this same center: person, who is speaking; time, the moment of speaking; place, the speaker's location; discourse, where we are in the conversation itself; and social status, the speaker's own rank relative to everyone else. Now notice the 2 circles around our speaker. Anything close to that center, physically, in time, or socially, takes the proximal form. This, here, now. Anything farther takes the distal form. That, there, then. Hold on to this picture because every category we discuss for the rest of this lecture is really just one more application of this same proximal distal logic. Now here's a skill I want you to walk away with today. Not every deictic-looking word is actually functioning deictically in a given sentence. Let's compare 3 uses. First, gestural use. Pass me that, not this one. Said, while pointing at 2 cups. You cannot understand this at all unless you see which cup is meant. That requires a physical cue. Second, symbolic use. This university was founded in 1978. No pointing needed. You already know, from general knowledge of the situation, which university is meant. And third, the one students often get wrong on exams, anaphoric use. Look at the sentence on the right. Jasper arrived early, he went straight to the office. That word, he, is not pointing out to the physical world. It points backward, inside the sentence, to a name already mentioned, Jasper. This is not deixis. We call it an anaphoric or non-deictic use. The very same word, like that or he, can shift between these categories depending entirely on the job it is doing in that specific sentence. Let's apply this to our first full category. Person deixis, the grammar that encodes who is playing what role in a conversation, mainly through pronouns. It rests on a simple 3-way split: first person, the speaker; second person, the addressee; and third person, everyone and everything else. Look carefully at this lecture hall. At any moment, only one person truly holds the floor as speaker. But notice the professor is speaking directly to one particular student, connected here by that dark red line. That student is the addressee, the second person, the one the speaker actually intends to reach. Everyone else in the room is listening too, but pragmatics gives them a different label: bystanders, present, but not the intended target, referred to, if at all, in the third person: he, she, they. This distinction might feel small right now, but hold on to it because it becomes important once we reach social deixis later in this lecture. Here is a place where your own language actually outperforms English in precision. English has exactly one word for we, covering two very different situations. Look at the two photos. On the left, an inclusive we, the speaker and everyone at the table included. On the right, an exclusive we, the speaker and one companion, while the addressee is deliberately blocked out. In English, we have to guess which meaning is intended, purely from context. Let's go, said to friends, is inclusive. Let us go, said to a captor, is exclusive. Filipino does not make you guess. It builds the distinction directly into the pronoun. Tayo na kumain, let's eat, uses tayo, which explicitly includes the addressee. Kami na lang ang kakain, we will eat without you, uses kami, which explicitly excludes them. So the next time someone in your barkada switches from tayo to kami, listen carefully because that single word choice is doing real grammatical work, deciding instantly whether you are in the group or out of it. Let's move from people to places. Spatial deixis anchors location to the speaker's position at the moment of speaking. English really has only two basic terms. Here, proximal, close to the speaker, and there, distal, away from the speaker. But look closely at this table, because English is the odd one out here. Filipino, and interestingly Japanese too, use a three-way system instead. Dito is near the speaker, Diyan is near the addressee, but not the speaker, and doon is away from both. Japanese does exactly the same thing. Kore, sor, are. Look at the bottom row. English forces that single word, there, to cover two logically different locations, near you and near neither of us. Filipino and Japanese speakers make that distinction automatically every time they speak. This is a great example of how something that feels completely natural in your own language is not actually shared by every language on Earth. Now let's talk about time, because temporal deixis hides a trap that catches even native speakers. Look at the sign pinned to that board. Submission deadline is tomorrow. Simple enough, right? But ask yourself, tomorrow relative to when? Here's the key distinction. Coding time is the moment a message is produced, when the sign was written. Receiving time is the moment it is read. In a live conversation, these two moments are the same, so we never notice the difference. But look at the timeline underneath. If this sign was written on a Monday, tomorrow means Tuesday. If nobody takes it down, and a student reads it on Wednesday, tomorrow now appears to mean Thursday, even though the sign itself never changed one word. This is exactly why your syllabus never says submit tomorrow. It says submit by November 19th. A calendrical date survives the gap between when a message is written and when it is read. A word like tomorrow does not. Here's a claim that might surprise you. Every time you choose a verb tense, you are performing an act of deixis. Look at the timeline. Present tense functions as the proximal form, close to now. I live in Kawayan is true right now. Past tense functions as the distal form, distant from now. I lived in Kawayan was true then, not now. So far, straightforward. But now look at the box below, labeled unreality. If I had a car, I would drive there myself. And that sentence is not describing the past at all. English is borrowing that same distal past tense form to signal distance, not from time, but from present reality itself. The grammar quietly tells you, I do not currently have a car. This same trick explains why a polite, hedged request often reaches for a past tense form. I was wondering if you could help sounds gentler than I wonder if you can help. Grammatical distance is doing the work of social distance, and we return to exactly this idea in modules 8 and 9. Our next category moves away from physical reality entirely and encodes something purely social: relative status between speakers. Levinson identifies 4 directions social Deixis can point in at once, one photo for each on this slide. Top left, referent honorifics, respect for the person being talked about, like the French tu and vous. Top right, addressee honorifics, respect for the person being talked to directly, regardless of what is actually being said. Bottom left, bystander honorifics, how your register shifts the moment someone new starts overhearing. Bottom right, setting honorifics, formality matched to the occasion, the difference between eating and dining. Now, here's an example you already use perfectly, probably without ever naming it. Filipino po and opo, kumain ka na and kumain na po kayo, are literally asking the exact same question. Po adds zero new factual content. What it adds is deference toward the addressee. That makes it a textbook addressee honorific, the same category as French tu and vous, and the same category as ikaw and kayo. Now, for one of my favorite ideas in this module, deictic projection. We said the deictic center is normally the speaker by default, but speakers can deliberately move that center somewhere else on purpose. Look at these 2 messages. I'll go to your apartment later, keeps the center on the speaker, movement described as away from me. I'll come to your apartment later projects that center onto the addressee, movement becomes toward you. Both promise the exact same visit. Nothing about the event has changed. But notice what that single word swap does emotionally. It places your sick friend, not yourself, at the center of the universe, grammatically speaking. This is not a random stylistic choice. It is a small, deliberate act of empathy, built directly into the grammar of motion verbs. The same projection happens on your own voicemail greeting. I am not here right now. That sentence only works because you have projected now forward onto whatever future moment a caller happens to listen. Our last 2 categories both show deixis escaping its usual boundaries. First, discourse deixis, sometimes called textual deixis. Look at the open book on this slide. Words like previous and next, this and that, don't point to physical space here. They point backward or forward through a text itself. As discussed in the previous module, points backward. We will return to this point in Module 8, points forward. These words are borrowed directly from spatial and temporal deixis, repurposed to navigate a text instead of a room. Second, and this gives us a genuinely useful diagnostic tool, watch what happens moving from direct to indirect speech. Direct, Maria asked, "Are you free this evening?" Indirect, Maria asked if I was free that evening. This becomes that, here becomes there, now becomes then. Every deictic expression shifts from proximal to distal. Direct speech dramatizes the original moment as though you were standing right there, proximal. Indirect speech reports it from the distance of the current retelling, distal. If you are ever unsure whether a word is truly deictic, test it, move it into indirect speech. If it shifts, it's deictic. Let's pull everything together. This table is the single most useful study tool in this lecture, so screenshot it or copy it into your notes now. Every category we covered today collapses into the same underlying pattern: a proximal column close to the speaker and a distal column away from the speaker. Person: I and we sit proximal, speaker-centered. He, she, and they sit distal, excluded from that inner circle. Place: here, this, and dito are proximal. There, that, diyan, and dun are distal. Time: now, this week, and present tense are proximal. Then, that week, and past tense are distal. Reality follows the same pattern. I can help is proximal, a current ability. I could help if is distal, hypothetical, pushed away from present fact. One single logic, proximal versus distal, running underneath 5 completely different grammatical systems. That is the elegance of deixis. So let's close where we started. Remember that text message from the beginning of this lecture? Nasa dito na ako, malapit na. At this point, you should be able to name what's happening immediately. Person, deixis in ako, spatial deixis in dito, and the deictic marker of distance in malapit na. Deixis proves that context is not some vague minor adjustment sitting on top of language. It is a real, describable, rule-governed grammatical system built directly into the pronouns, tense markers, and honorifics of every human language you will ever study. Here is the final thought I want you to sit with. Without knowing who is speaking, where, and when, our most common words are perfectly grammatical and utterly empty. Next module, we build on this exact foundation and open the larger territory of reference and inference. See you then.